Hello, it's your community manager, Janna. Today, I'm going to be bringing in one of BookShark's advisors. Her name is Tanya. She's been with BookShark for several years now. You may have talked to her on the phone if you were looking for advice on which level to use, or maybe some advice on just how to get things going with BookShark. She is a mom of 5. She herself has been through quite a year as a military family. They do a lot of moving around and finding new community and building new community. And if anyone has been off track because of the life that they live, it is Tanya. So I was going to chat about what you can do if you're feeling like your homeschool has possibly derailed a bit. It's February, depending on when you started your class, when you started your schedule. You might be 2/3 of the way through. If you're a year-round schedule, you might just be starting over again in January and you're just in the beginnings of it. But we want to encourage you to either with your starting or you're halfway through, wherever you're at in your homeschool journey, to keep going. We're going to give you some great tips on how to get back on track if you feel derailed. So I'm going to bring Tanya in.
Hey, Janna.
Good morning, Tanya. Thanks so much for being here with us.
Thank you.
It's actually afternoon where you're at. Is that correct?
Yes, 1:00 on the East Coast.
On the East Coast. So why don't you start off by just introducing yourself if maybe some of our listeners or viewers have not had a chance to talk to you on the phone or meet you in the booth at the homeschool convention, and give a little bit of background of your homeschool experience.
I am Tanya, military wife to Rick, who is a surgeon in the Navy, and we move every 3.5 years. We are parents to 5 teenagers. They're 19, 19, 18, 16, and 14. 3 of them just graduated in August, so I'm down to homeschooling 2, which is so exciting. But at the same time, I'm finding that we have been derailed this year more than other years because now I'm competing with 2 college schedules, and my other son is in the working force now. So I felt like this year I would take off time when my college students were home, but then it turns out that's a lot of time off. And so getting back, starting again has been really hard.
I bet. And now, in the years that I've known you, you have done 2 moves, and one of them was just up the coast, but this last one was cross country.
Yeah, Washington to North Carolina. So thankfully, we moved our moves to the summer. We used to be January movers, which is not ideal with snow and everything. So now we're summer movers, and that's been great. But this move was probably our hardest of all because we had 4 different moves in one, because we had 2 college students moving out. So we had to separate their stuff, and then one moving off on his own, and then our stuff. So it was super complicated, and it took a very long time.
I cannot even imagine. I give you kudos for being the brave woman that you are. And in the midst of all of this, you're still homeschooling 2 children. So what has that done, not only going from 5 to 2 this year? I mean, I know going from 3 to 1 really in itself kind of derailed me because I was so used to getting us all together and everyone being together. And now I've got 2 off doing their own things, having their different schedules, that I feel like when I'm down to 1, I kind of get lost. I thought it would be easier, but it's actually a little bit harder.
Yeah, I think it is a little harder because, like you said, we used to all start at one time. And now that 3 are out of the home, so I still potentially could do that. But like I said, now with the college schedule, it's a little more tricky because I want them to see their siblings when they're home, but the 2 in college have different schedules from each other. So the spring breaks are different. The Christmas break was slightly different. So then my younger kids ended up taking off like over a month. So it makes it way harder. Yeah, having
Yeah,
a split like that.
it doesn't, you don't even, it's one of those things you don't realize until you're in it, that, oh my gosh, okay, now we have to stop, reassess, and figure out. Because the same thing with my younger, who's still homeschooling, when her siblings are off, it's like, why, she doesn't want to do school when her sisters are home and having fun. And that, as a homeschool parent, I'm a little type A. I hate to admit it, but I am. I'm like kind
Me
of, I'd like
too.
to say I'm like an AB, right? I kind of ride in the middle of those two personalities. So I want to be chill and like, sure, we're homeschoolers, we can catch up. But then I start to sweat because I'm like, I'm seeing the weeks tick away and oh my gosh, we're only in week 13 and
Yes.
it's January.
Yes, this is my situation exactly right now. I feel like we've been in week 16 for 16 weeks. I'm in the exact situation. I'm like, why is this 1 week taking us so long? So yeah, you have to start this week alone. I started a reset. Like we're starting over, pretending like we're fresh, and we've started week 16 again for the last time this week on Monday.
Yeah. Fingers crossed.
I know.
This is the last day one of week 16. But I
Yes.
think it's a testimony to what homeschool really is all about, right? If we
Right.
go back to, we've said it over and over, our why we choose to homeschool. We all have our different reasons, but if your why is lining up with kind of the derailment, right? It's to be
Mhm.
together as a family. It's to be able to vacation or holiday together. Then we have to just take a deep breath and know that we can get back on track. We can reset whenever we want. And so, what
Mhm.
is that reset? How did that look for you and your family this week?
So I set expectations over the weekend and said we will be starting school on Monday. Now we've been doing school the whole time, but it's been very light. It's been like math, a little bit of reading. It hasn't been like our rigorous schedule that we typically keep. So on Sunday night, I felt like it was super important to clean out the homeschool area as if I was starting in the fall and get out all my supplies for the week, all the books that were to be read that week. And I gave them an expectation at dinner time on Sunday night. We'll be waking up at this time, we'll be starting, and this is what's expected of you. And we did that. And we started Monday, and here it is Wednesday, and we've completed day 3, week 16. And I think we're ahead on some of our books. So I feel really good about that.
It is amazing that if we just stop and kind of go back to the beginning, right? We have recently released the boot camp accelerated so people can rewatch those first 9 weeks of how to get into BookShark and how to use your curriculum. But it's okay to start over. It's okay to start again. You don't have to feel like you're a failure. This is your schedule, your plan for your family. And although, your curriculum will have a set time, you can use it however you want. I think part of my problem is that I get bogged down with my unmet expectations. Like
Yeah.
the last 6 years in February, we have already been to almost to week 20, knowing that we
Right.
have 4 more months of school left. But with this year, it's gotten away from me. And sometimes I feel like that pressure almost paralyzes me that
Mhm.
then I don't end up doing anything or very little. And then it's a vicious cycle.
Well, I have to remind myself that every year looks different. So one year we started, I don't remember why, but we finished a curriculum, a level in March. And then I was able to start the next year. So we did like March to June. And then I picked up in August. And then I was done again by March. And I kind of loved that. Well, this year I didn't do it that way. So it's kind of like freaking me out a little. But I have to remember it doesn't matter. I'm going to finish when I finish, and it is what it is. I mean, they're still getting more than I guess if they were in public school as far as history and math. We're still following our curriculum. We're just sometimes a little lagging on our math or our reading, but we're going to get back on track.
Absolutely. And I think getting back on track is just going ahead and doing one thing, right? Like you said, in the week that you were in, instead of freaking
Mhm.
out and saying, we're behind, now we have to do 3 days in one day, right?
Oh
Because I
yeah,
think
yeah.
that's how I tend to be also like, okay, to get back on track, we have to catch up. And that can totally derail you in a week or two if you even get that far, right?
Yeah, and they're really not taking in as much information. And as you all know with BookShark, it is very hard to double up in your reading. We read everything aloud together, and we're doing level I for our ninth grade level. Actually, I have a 10th and an eighth grader, but I'm doing level I as our American history. And so, there's a lot of reading involved, and we do it all together out loud. So you can't double up, not in my house. It just would go on too long. So for them to retain the information, enjoy the enjoy the subject matter, I don't want to double up. So I think it's just a matter of using that fifth day wisely. Sometimes I use it to get a little bit ahead. So if we have a slower week, it kind of balances it out.
Yeah. Now, I will say in our household, science, we do feel like we can double up
Yes.
if necessary, right? So, if someone had actually posed a question to our advisors last week, could I do science 2 days a week instead of 4 days a week? Well, I feel
Absolutely.
like, yeah, you certainly could.
Mhm.
Caveat, if you're doing level J, the history of science, that
So,
might not work out as well. But if we're talking about our lower levels up to I and J, you
yes.
certainly could do 2 days a week of science, and they could be fun.
Yeah, we do that. We do 2 and sometimes 3 days a week of science, because sometimes I'll do the 2 weeks of BookShark, and then I'll go on to Teachers Pay Teachers and get some free add-ons. So right now we're in the midst of the chemistry lesson. I had done level A, B, C, G, H. It's science H. So I did the biology portion last year, and this year I've broken up the chemistry physics together. And so I'll do some add-ins, like we're doing the periodic table. So I'll just go on there and get some free worksheets and add that in on my third day, just to supplement a little bit and just for better understanding, honestly, because I don't know that it always goes in. My younger student isn't always, doesn't have the full understanding. She's not in high school yet. So that's what I've done for the third day of science, but definitely pair up on the science. And I'm also able to do that sometimes with the language arts, to do 3 days of the language arts.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's kind of too you kind of have to gauge where your child is at, right? Like
Yeah.
if we have some parents who call in and they'll say, "Oh my gosh, we read through a whole book in a week." Well, that's great. Like if your child wants you to keep going, you get to decide, "Well, no, we need to stop and we need to do other things." Although whenever my kids wanted me to keep going, I knew it wasn't going to last, so I was just going to keep going with them. Like if you want to keep going, we're going to keep going because they
Yeah.
were having fun. They were having fun. And I think another thing that happens as a homeschool mom is when we feel behind, we start to put that pressure on our kids, and then they stop having fun in learning. And what is the point if they're not interested in engaging and enjoying it? That is one of the reasons that we're at home educating our children.
Right. Yeah.
And then you can add those activities. I think the other thing is like we want to start taking the fun out of it so that we can catch up with the have to. And that is a temptation that I would just encourage parents, don't take away the field trips, because even though you feel like you're going to get further behind, it is part of the learning and the experience that you want to bring to them in this homeschool education.
And ironically, let's be honest, that's what they remember are the hands-on and the activities, the field trips and those things. So it is important. Yeah.
And to give parents permission to get comfortable with, switching some things out. If you feel like they already know what you're talking about, then speed it up, skip over it. It's okay. And especially history gets repeated over and over again. You could
Mhm.
watch a 15-minute documentary and knock out a couple chapters. Now they may not be the exact same things that your curriculum is covering, but it's the gist of it, right? Like it's funny that it's like we need to give ourselves permission to get creative and have
Mhm.
fun and not feel like it's this deadline that we have to meet, and you're not going to get your paycheck if you don't do it.
Funny that you say that about history repeating, because today we're doing level I, and we took it outside today because it's in the 70s. And we were reading A Boy's War, and it's based on the Civil War, and it's talking about all these boys that are underage that joined into the Civil War. And so we were reading about one particular character, and as I was reading it, my 8th grader mentioned we learned about him in level D, and I thought, man, level D was a long time ago. I didn't even remember that, but she did. So I love that, there's still, it ties all together. So
Yeah.
that was exciting for me, because I was like, "Oh, really?" Apparently, we drew that character. I don't remember. I'm telling you, that was at least, I don't know, 7 years ago, 6 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny what gets embedded in our brains, and then it's funny what actually brings it back out. Like, we have no idea. I don't remember what I learned in third grade social studies in public school. I mean, that's just
Yeah.
not something that I've carried with me. And so I try not to get stressed out about what my kids are picking up. Like, we're teaching the love of learning, and that is like the goal, not so much the information. Sure, we need to add and subtract and be able to recognize a noun and a verb, but it's like that stuff it's going to come, it's going to get repeated. So I feel like part of getting back on track after this derailment is just breathing and remembering that it's not always about checking off the box so much as it is enjoying learning alongside your kids.
Yes, yes. And I have been guilty of being a box checker because I am a type A person. So this is my first year really feeling more derailed than others, probably because of our move and 3 kids moving out and just a lot of family stuff going on. So it's been hard, but I've also had to like let go of the type A and just embrace where we're at. And if we're on week 16 in February, who cares? you know?
It's true. And I think, I mean, as granted, you and I, our youngest are eighth graders, so 13, 14. But I feel like the more I'm letting go of checking all the boxes, she's actually stepping up. And there'll
Mhm.
be days where all of a sudden, because we're doing virtual, I'll get notifications that she's just really gotten through some work. And I'm like, wow, she's just really getting it done today. Um, but I think if I'm like, why are we still here? Why aren't you getting that done? And I need to make a list for you. I think that would paralyze her just like it would me. I think we forget that our children feed off of our energy, and they're just little humans too. And so if we're feeling stressed, don't you think they can feel it too? And that's going to shut them down, and
For sure.
they're going to take twice as long.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is the opposite of what we want or need.
It's like when you're trying to get out the door and nobody can find their shoes, and you don't
Every
know where the dog's at.
yes.
So maybe just permission, like we've said, to take a breath, to relax, to know that you're gonna get through it. You don't have to get through it all. You're the one that sets your timeline. What are some other things that you guys do in your family to kind of not even get back, let's not even say on schedule, right? But just back in the groove of things.
Well, I tried to make it more interesting, like on the nicer days, take our reading outside. So we sat around the fire pit. We didn't light the fire pit, but it was nice to just take a book outside, and the dogs were romping around and we just listened outside to while I read out loud. And I feel like just making slight little tiny changes kind of gives them a boost. I remember like when I went to public school, and I remember when the teacher would just even rearrange the room, it would be so exciting. And it was very rare that that happened, but I think little tiny changes, just changing the room you're in. I always try to shift, like we start in the living room for our readings, and then we move to the table for like science. And then they move to the computer desk for their math lessons. And so I think the tiny changes, so they're not always in a seat, because that, I have one with ADHD. So sitting in a seat the whole time is very boring and tedious. So I think just changing it up, like I offered today to even sit on the trampoline. We could all sit on the trampoline and read our books. So, just little slight changes. I think that helps.
And I know that it's funny, we forget those little changes mean so much to us.
Yeah.
Why do we not think that they're going to mean so much to our kids? Like, if you usually work Monday through Thursday and have Friday off, well, what if you switched it up and the next week you took Monday off and worked Tuesday through Friday? I mean, just little, like you said, little switches that it helps our brain get excited again about the things that we're doing. And it's just for humans, not adults, not children. It's like for everybody.
Yeah, yeah. Or even some people like to start off with a walk, walking the dogs. I do best if we start off with all of our reading, and then halfway through, we might take the dogs for a walk, something like that. Just, I think being out in nature is so helpful if you live in a climate. We came from Washington State where it rains 24/7. So we're so excited about the weather here. And so we're trying to take advantage of that. And I think that helps, just getting your kids out in nature and the fresh air. It really makes a difference.
I will even say, being in Colorado, we've had some really cold days. And I grew up in the Midwest, so I was used to going out in the cold during the winters. And so I don't know why I'm surprised that I'm like, oh, it's cold. I don't want to go out. But the other day I was looking for my daughter, and even though it was chilly out, it was sunny, and she was sitting outside in the sun reading. And I was like, oh, well, that makes perfect sense. We all need some sunshine, or it's February. We're itching for the spring. We're no matter where you're at, in the United States, it's you've gotten that's why we need a change of season, and we need a change of scenery, as we're doing our homeschool, moms, parents, and children.
Yeah.
So besides, you had mentioned a great one. You said bring back Sunday planning. I mean, that obviously was huge for you guys this week, which is a great reminder.
Yes.
Make those little changes, change of scenery, change of pace, how you're doing it. Do you guys plan regular outings, or does that happen just because of your schedule that you keep?
Yeah, not necessarily, because of course we're new to an area, so we haven't met very many people, but there is something on a schedule. I've joined a lot of Facebook groups for homeschoolers in the area, and I try to jump in when I can. Like there's one, it's a little harder when you have older kids because they're not as interested in some of the activities, but there is one at a trampoline park, and my son is a big flipper. He is really good at backflipping. So I am going to join that, and it's a bunch of teen homeschoolers. So I'll add in things like that, but we're not consistent on a weekly basis of doing that because I feel like, well, number one, my kids are older, so there's not that many things out there for teens, is what I'm finding in this area. And number two, that does derail me a little bit, is if I have to commit to something, plus our homeschooling,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
try
And
to
I
make
do
it.
feel like the winter time is a good time to use your shorter days, not a lot going on, to kind of hunker down and maybe not take the fifth day off and go ahead and work through it, because once the weather changes, there's going to be so many opportunities to do things, and you want to set yourself up for success at the end of the year as
Right.
well.
Yeah. Yeah. Or spring break when the kids come home from college. I feel bad about making these ones work when I've got the other ones home that want to go out and do things. So, yeah.
Yeah. It's like we don't want to be planners, but we have to be planners. It's
Yeah.
very conflicting, Tanya. It's, one day at a time for sure. One day at a time. Well, I appreciate you coming on and just giving us some really practical boots on the ground tips on how to get back on track. And so happy to hear that you guys have had a successful week 16.
Yay. Yes.
We hope that you guys were encouraged by listening to this. Again, Tanya is one of our advisors. If you do have some questions for her, you can definitely contact main@bookshark.com through email, or you can call our toll-free number. Go on the website to look for that. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.